YouTube, how the duck you doing? Duck Films here. What I got for you today is a video talking about Year 1, Season 1.2 patch notes for XDefiant. And I want to quickly ask, if you're new here and haven't already, please do me a huge favor and hit that like and subscribe button, as it greatly helps me out. But anyways, let's dive straight into the patch notes. For this specific video, 3 major sections of the patch notes: the gameplay changes, faction changes, and the weapon changes. But starting with the gameplay changes, they fixed and changed 2 different things. The first one is they fixed a delay in reloading, swapping weapons, or deploying devices caused by players rapidly tapping fire and ability buttons. So if you were jump spamming abilities, or spamming reload, hopefully you'll see less delay in combining all these actions. There's a lot of instances where I tried to pop an ability or tried to swap weapons, but there was a delay, giving the reload input higher priority than simply reloading. Hopefully with this change, it fixes that issue. And they also fix and address the issue where players could take advantage of a speed hack, and instead of breaking the sound barrier, they'll ultimately end up finding themselves locked in place. Now, when I first glanced over this change, I never really saw any speed hackers, but when I read the patch notes a second time through, I definitely recall sometimes there being speed hackers, but as of late, there's not that many speed hackers, mainly just people using aimbot, stuff like that. Next, we're going to be looking at the faction changes. Again, feel free to stop and read them at any time you want. So in the faction section of the patch notes, the first point talked a little about the new GSK faction and how to pronounce the name or whatever. Kinda cool, I guess. Now the second point is what people have been praying and asking for. Finally, the DeadSec spider bots were fixed. The first issue that was fixed is that the DeadSec spider bots were ignoring victims previously targeted by the deploying player. A more simplified version of saying this is that previously, if the spider bot went for you, in theory, if the player deployed another spider bot, it wouldn't go for you. But now it seems like they kind of reverted that to where it can still target you. Another major change is that you can once again shoot DeadSec spider bots off your own face. Now for some reason they decided to remove this feature. They also even stated that this feature was never supposed to actually be in the game, but honestly if they didn't bring this back, I think I literally would have gone insane. Following the changes to the spider bot, the Echelon Intel Suit got a nerf. Now the Intel Suit pulses every 4 seconds instead of 3 seconds. As well, enemies remain highlighted for 1 second rather than 2.7 seconds. Now I'll personally say that I think the Intel Suit is really good and it's probably one of my favorite gadgets. But even having a biased opinion on this gadget, it definitely needed a nerf, as having constant wall hacks, or just generally knowing where enemy players are at all times, was definitely a little overpowered in this game. So I'm glad to see that they're tweaking it. Now hopefully they can change that firebomb. But speaking of firebombs, such abilities such as firebombs, the digital ghillie suit, and the BioVita boost, there was a bug going around that you weren't able to activate it, or it would just occasionally just stop working in general, meaning you weren't able to use the ability at all, unless you swapped your abilities, or swapped your factions, or just generally left the game. In the patch notes they said they fixed it, and while I can say in game I haven't had any issues, and hopefully it stays that way. Now before we move into our last point, I want to again ask, if you're new here and haven't already, please do me a huge favor, hit that like and subscribe button, as it greatly helps me out. But anyways, our last topic before we move into some gameplay was that there was a lot of weapon changes, buffing and nerfing, and a whole bunch more. But moving on to the weapons, the M4A1 got a much needed short range damage increase from 17 to 18. Now I would definitely say that this is a right step in the direction for buffing the M4, as it's one of the default weapons, or the first weapon you unlock. It's a little lackluster compared to a lot of the other weapons. I wouldn't even say a little, it's more like it's definitely lackluster. Now the next weapon that got buffed was the MDR. The MDR got 2 different buffs. The first buff for the MDR was that the short range damage was increased from 17 to 19. And let me tell you, in game, that 17 to 19 is insane. Honestly, the weapon feels incredible. It's to the point that I would personally say it's on par with the AK-47, but it's still below the ACR. Now the next buff for the MDR was the ADS speed improved from 300 ms to 250 ms. Now again, this is a really good change. They're buffing the MDR, so hopefully more people will start to use the new guns. But one thing I did notice with the MDR is that there used to be the bug where you would shoot with the Inferno skin and it felt like the red dot literally had recoil. I can say it's kind of gone. Now you get this really weird animation with the MDR. While you're aimed down sight and shooting, it kind of slowly zooms in. I feel like this quote unquote feature isn't really intended, so hopefully they fix it. As the MDR after the change literally felt insane, but I just couldn't play it for so long because I literally got a headache. Now another weapon that got a much needed buff was the MP5. So the MP5's medium range damage was increased from 13 to 14, so it can compete a little bit better with say the MP7, P90 and whatnot, as well as the headshot multiplier for the MP5 was increased. It was originally at 1.35, but now it's at 1.4, meaning you'll get rewarded better for landing headshots with the MP5 now. Now that wasn't the only change done to the MP5. Besides the medium range damage increase, the short range for the MP5 was also increased, not the damage but the range. The range was originally 16 meters, it's now to 18 meters, meaning it can now compete better with other weapons in the same category, as well as the medium range was also increased from 25 meters to 27. Again, hopefully all these changes to the MP5 gives you a second thought on what weapon to pick when you're playing a game. Now among all these weapon changes, all of the snipers also got changed. Well, kind of. So the M44, or the Car 98, whatever you want to call this weapon, the M44's sprint out time, or the sprint to shoot time, was increased from 350 milliseconds to 400 milliseconds. Now a lot of people that snipe in this game will see this as a nerf, which is kind of sad, but it makes sense as the snipers in this specific game tend to be a little strong, but that's debatable. Next, the TAC 50 sprint to shoot time was also increased. It was originally at 600 ms, it's now at 625 ms. And lastly, the L115, its sprint to shoot time was also increased from 550 milliseconds to 575 milliseconds. Now while I was playing the new update, I really didn't notice a difference, but there's always going to be those people out there with their stopwatch and timers tracking the time. Another thing is that all these sniper rifles got a small increase in spread when shooting from the hip, as opposed to aiming down the sights. Now I'm not really too sure what that means, but let me know down below in the comments. So among the weapons, there's a couple last things. One thing is that they improved the visual presentation of tracer fire and ammo case ejection, so both depart more accurately from their respective weapons. Is this a visual thing? Doesn't matter a whole much, but if you're a visual nerd, then this is right up your alley. Another thing is that they adjusted how the aiming system detects players' inputs so that recoil recovery turns to the center of the screen rather than being thrown off by unintended player jitters in the heat of combat. Now to be honest, when I was reading that part, I was kind of lost in the sauce and I didn't really understand what it meant, but what I think it means is if you get shot in game, your weapon should return to the center of the screen rather than being off put. Now forgive me if I'm wrong, but let me know down in the comments below, as personally I'm a little confused on this. Now another glitch that they fixed involving the guns, or the weapons of the game, they fixed a glitch that allowed players to fire automatically upon respawning if they spammed on the fire and sprint buttons while dying. Now honestly, I wasn't even spamming buttons or anything like that, and my gun would still just randomly fire upon respawn. I can confidently say after playing this patch that this issue is definitely fixed, and I'm glad it is. It was a little frustrating upon respawn that all of a sudden you get jump scared by a loud bang, but that might just be me. But that's gonna finish off the patch notes section of the video. The little time left I have is going to be the rest of this gameplay. If you like this type of content or want to see more, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. I hope you have a great day and I'll catch you in the next.